Okay. Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Betty. I'm the Special Hazards Training Coordinator, and I'm going to talk to you today about Adobe Connect.
Hi, I'm Josh Shanley. I'm the media specialist for DFS and the Mass Fire Academy.
Well, thank you all for joining today. We're going to start with a little bit of philosophy of why we're giving you this training on Adobe Connect, basically our virtual classroom or the DFS virtual classroom. What's become apparent with the COVID-19 crisis is that we need to change the philosophy in which how we do training here at MFA. And the mandate we've had is that we need to go with virtual classrooms since we're not going to have any students on our campuses for the foreseeable future. So we needed to find a software platform. We went and found Adobe Connect because it works nicely with the existing software that we currently use at MFA. And we're going to basically showcase you today how to use that software as an instructor, or what we call a presenter. So this is a little bit, we're going to get technical. We're going to show you how the software works. Josh and I are going to go back and forth talking about all the different functions that you have. Pretty simple to use. But before we get into the software, I'm going to turn it over to Josh so we can talk a little bit more about some of the things that you should be prepping yourself on before you go on the camera to teach MFA students.
All right, thanks, Paul. We're going to do a couple things today. As Paul indicated, we're going to go through the technical elements of the Adobe Connect platform and specifically on the app and why it's important to do that. And we'll go back and forth, Paul and I, on both the technical elements. But one thing that I hope that we emerge on the other side of this, the COVID-19 threat, is that we're better off as an agency. And we use these tools not only as a fallback position, but going forward in the new normal, when we do start going back to a classroom and we do have face-to-face contact again, that we don't set this tool aside, that we figure out how to take advantage of this time that we've spent, that we've invested on this platform. So I think that this tool will be part of the new normal. So I hope that you embrace it as much as we have, and as much as the instructors and coordinators who've used it so far have. We've gotten, with a small group, we've gotten a lot of positive feedback. So I hope you find that. We are available to answer questions, and we'll be running sessions that facilitate the learning around how to capitalize on this. So a couple things as we get started. Setting up your audio is really important, and Paul will go through how to set up an audio wizard. But one thing that you're going to have to figure out as an individual instructor, and the students are also going to have to figure out, is what is the right combination of hardware. Today I'm using a Mac. I'm using the on-screen or the laptop computer, and I'm using the mic that fits in, that's built into the computer. Very straightforward setup. We've had some initial problems with headsets and mics. That said, you're going to need to figure out ahead of time in terms of what works best for you. So that's going to involve some experimenting, and we're available to help you walk through that process. The bottom line, though, is that the audio needs to be clear. It needs to be clean and consistent across the instructors and across the students as well. So in terms of the video conferencing, you'll see, well, I'll use Paul and I as a comparison here, since we're right in front of you. What I've done on my computer is, again, I'm using the camera on my laptop, and I have propped up the back of my computer onto a small crate that's about 3 inches tall. And what that's done is brought the camera up so it's more or less 90 degrees. So you're looking more naturally, as if you were looking in my eye. When I speak and when I remember to do so, I'm looking at the camera versus looking at the screen. It's more natural, as compared to Paul, who has set the computer down on his desk or dining room table and now is looking up. And so Paul is looking down and he's looking into the screen. This is the natural setup that people are doing currently. What I want you to encourage you to do is try to adjust, make a setup where your camera is more propped up, so you're looking more 90 degrees at it, and your when you can remember when you are trying to engage with learners, I am looking right at the camera, not at the screen. Again, these are tips, but the idea with all of the tips that I'm trying to provide you is that you will be able to make a more natural and closer connection with the students. And all of these things are designed to make your presentation, make the material that you're sharing with them, make more of an impact. They'll be able to absorb it and then apply it either in an academic setting or probably more likely in the drill yard when they're trying to perform skills. So that's what everything I'm talking to you about is centered around. We have the ability to record all sessions, and for the most part, we're going to be doing that by default. You'll see up in the upper right corner of your screen, there's a red dot, kind of the universal signal for this meeting is being recorded. There's also a pop-up announcement that lets everyone in the classroom know that they are being recorded. In terms of organization, and Paul will talk about this a little bit more, but when we start referring to the different people in the classroom, there are going to be different hosts who have the highest level of access and control, the presenters who are the instructors essentially, and they have the ability to move slides around and some other features that Paul will talk about, and then the participants who are essentially the students in this case. Paul, do you want to cover any of that now, or do you want to come back?
No, I'll wait for you to finish.
In terms of as hosts, at this time we have 3 hosts. Ultimately, we'll have for the short-term future, we'll have a total of 5 hosts. Hosts are going to be in the position of assisting the instructors and the students in terms of the technical aspects. We will have. I've been a firefighter for coming up on 30 years, so I have a good handle on the subject matter. But the hosts are not intended to substitute as instructors. We want to keep that line clear with you as instructors and coordinators, but also clear with the participants. So we certainly have some context. We understand the material you're covering, but we don't want to confuse anyone with dealing with the subject matter specifically. That said, if you need some help or we can help put things into context for you, that's what our role is. We'll also be able to help you with media and accessing media and sharing files, and those are the things Paul will be talking about in more detail shortly. In terms of presenters or instructors or coordinators, your level of there are only a couple features that as hosts we can control over that you will not have control over, and it's moving windows but as presenters, you'll have the ability to move your slides forward, queue up audio, and those kinds of things. Participants have a very different view of the screen, and Paul will demonstrate that in a little bit, but obviously their ability to control the classroom is limited. We'll also be talking about how you can share your screens, and when you share a screen, it could be your desktop, your actual desktop computer that you're on, but more likely it's going to be accessing the media that is preloaded on the backside of the Adobe Connect platform, and Paul's going to demonstrate how to access your slides, your video, any documents you want to share. And it's important, and it'll become apparent when you don't remember to do so, but it's important to preload all of your slides and any media, in particular video, because those are large files, and it does take a long time to upload the media. So uploading in real time is possible, but not practical, especially in a full classroom. So it's going to as far as instructors go, it's going to put a little extra pressure on you to, prepare your classroom ahead of time. Paul will also talk about whiteboards and how whiteboards, just like you have in a classroom, we have an electronic version of that, and how you can draw on it, how you can add text, how we can have images set over a whiteboard, and you can uh, uh, draw over it as if you were looking at a floor plan and developing a pre-plan for a fire. You can talk your students into talk your students around how to make entry, how to do some pre-planning, those kinds of things. The other feature that we're working on and we'll be working on with you is how to create breakout rooms. I'll digress for a moment and say both Paul and I have been involved in the fire service for a long time and walked this line between academy instructors and having that field operations experience. And one thing that we're passionate about is bringing the culture of the fire service into the Adobe Connect platform. And it's frankly been we're figuring it out as we go. So, but one thing we want to do is be able to duplicate the squads and the camaraderie that happens during breakout sessions. So with that in mind, what we hope to be able to offer you is the ability to create breakout rooms where you might be able to break out a large class into squads, assign a squad leader, give them an assignment to walk through in their respective Adobe Connect breakout rooms, which you as instructors would be able to go in and out of for say 15, 20 minutes, and then have them come out and share their findings. So it's an interesting way to maintain that culture of squads and leadership and also collaboration in the Adobe Connect platform. So we're looking forward to getting your feedback on how to work with that better. The other thing that you'll see is, and Paul will demonstrate this more, is how working with the different portions of the meeting room or the classroom are set up. And basically, when we're looking at the classrooms, there are a couple different components. We'll be looking at the communicating between hosts and presenters and participants. You'll also have a sharing pod and a video pod. We'll also be discussing, and Paul will be demonstrating how to use the polls for pods as well. One thing we're finding with the chat pod is that it's become a real powerful way for everyone to communicate. It's one of the big problems that or feedback as far as instructors go when they're trying to connect with their students is they don't have that ability to see the heads nodding and, getting that dialogue that is not, that we're limited to in this electronic format. We're finding that the chat pod, when moderated with one instructor while another one is presenting perhaps, is that students can start to ask questions, can start to ask for clarification, can offer context, and a co-instructor can begin to moderate in tandem with the on-screen presenter, the instructor who's running the slides. And the chat pod is turning out to be a really powerful tool. The co-instructor then can either open up the mic of a student, or the co-instructor can use his or her mic to highlight or reiterate a theme that's developing in the chat pod. And we're finding through our observation that it's directing the instructors down certain paths that may not have been available previously. And I'll say that maybe in a way that that wouldn't happen in the online or in the traditional classroom, I should say. So the chat pod is turning out to be really interesting tool. At the same time, it's putting pressure on the instructors to be able to watch that as they go and to be able to respond to it, to acknowledge that that is a part of the classroom. And the instructors are having to figure out just how to moderate it. Is it through chat response, through text response, or is it through an audio response? Are we queuing up the students to open up mics and to add more on what they started in the chat thread? So this is something that is still rapidly developing, and we're figuring out, and we hope you take it and run with it. The other thing that Paul will talk about is the importance of using poll questions, and he'll demonstrate polling your audience, and he'll explain why that's important. But essentially, we're using it for two functions broadly, and there are probably more. But at this point, we're using it first as a knowledge check to make sure that students are understanding what you're presenting them with. Are they getting it? So the poll questions are prepared by the instructors and the coordinators, and they are popped up at certain points within the training day, and they are subject matter based. The other thing that we're doing with the poll questions, it's our way of checking attendance, and Paul will talk about that in more detail in just a moment. Two more things. When in today's day and age, where we've been at home now for months, and we're going to be working at home for the next several months, it looks like, it's easy to fall into a little more comfortable than we are in the classroom. So what we want to do is for your instructors and your coordinators, they want to be in a uniform. They want to make sure that they're in a professional setting, as should the students be. But the instructors are always held to a higher standard. So we want to make sure that we're in a uniform, that we have, if we're not in an office, we're at least in a clean setting that looks orderly, and as if you were presenting yourself in a classroom at the academy or any firehouse around the Commonwealth. These details matter, as does the same. You want to present yourself in the same way that you would in the online setting as you would as if you were showing up for a class.
Sounds great, Josh. Thanks for that info. That'll help the instructors prepare, or better prepare, for actually entering into the virtual classroom for the first time. What I'd like to take you all through now is actually using the software and actually using what you can get access to as a presenter. So if you made it this far in the training, you've already entered into the virtual classroom. The virtual classroom is different, or there's a different URL that is generated depending on what class we're teaching or what session is actually being done. That URL actually changes. But the URL does stay consistent for every training day within that session. So if you have a 5-day training class, I'll pick on like fire officer or fire instructor, and the students are with you for 5 days, that link or URL is going to be the same for those 5 days. But if you were then to move from that class to go teach OLR class or RIT class, you would actually have a different URL. And that is all going to be managed through the LMS system, very similar to how it is done now. If you were sending IFSTA links out, we would use LMS to do that. But the first thing I want to start you with is what you do once you first enter the virtual classroom. So what I'm going to have you do is go over to the meeting tab. Take you through is the audio setup wizard. Some of you should have done this when you've done your test connection when you were first getting into the virtual classroom. But if you didn't do that, what I'm going to have you do is you go up to the top left of the screen and click on the meeting icon. And then you would go to the audio setup wizard. Once you get into the audio setup wizard, you keep hitting next and following the instructions on the screen. And what that will do is that'll actually take you through setting up your microphone volume as well as your audio output from your speaker. These two things, I can't stress enough how important it is that the instructor or the presenter has these set up properly before they start training our students. So if you have not done that, please take the time to go through your audio setup wizard. The next items I would like to take you through is turning on your webcam, or what they call starting my webcam. So that is how you would enable your camera. Again, it's imperative that you use the student document that we prepared, which basically tells you everything you need for hardware. Josh referenced this earlier, but that you have a system that is capable of both having a microphone and speakers, but also that it has a webcam. You cannot be a presenter or instructor if you do not have the proper hardware. So at this time, you would enable your webcam. And then the next thing you would do is connect my audio, which basically turns on your speakers and enables your microphones. And this is basically how you're going to engage with the students. So you would have to do that. So again, audio setup wizard, start my webcam, and then connect my audio. Once you did that, now you're ready to deal with the students. One of the other things that we want to stress on preparation is this is no different than if you were teaching a class at the academy in an actual classroom. The expectation is instructors are entering the room at least a half an hour early, which is standard learning from Fire Instructor 1, that you're in there preparing. And that's where you're making sure your hardware is working and your audio is set up, and that you're also prepared to lecture on the content of the day. And we will show you how you can view that content in a little bit. Next, I want to take you through different facets of the software itself, some of them that Josh already alluded to. But the first that I want to start you with is the chat. So the chat, if you go over the chat menu bar, you have many options as a presenter. The first we want to talk to you about is you have the ability to set your text size. If you have a hard time reading smaller text, you can increase the text size that just affects your screen only. So you would go in to the menu up button, you would go to the text size, and then you would scroll and change the text size to anything that you wanted or anything that makes it more comfortable for you. You also have the ability to set my chat color. And what we want to do there is we want to set instructors and hosts to use different colors so they stand out differently than the students. So what we'd like to do is we're going to ask that all instructors or presenters set their icons to green, and we're going to set all our hosts to blue, and then the students would be in the standard black text format. And what that does is when you start doing a texting string, the students see a color change, and then they know who's actually talking to them. In this case, my text now comes up green, and it shows that an instructor is actually talking to the students. Josh is then going to go test it, and he is actually going to have his text be blue because he's actually talking to them as the host. The students, as they enter the chat screen, they would then be having black text in the background. There you go, Josh. Thank you. So that's how we want to set up the chat. The other feature, a very powerful feature within the chat, is you have the ability to select who you want to chat with. So you would go to the chat menu button. You would then go start chat with, and if you notice, you have 3 different options. You can choose to select the hosts, the presenters, or the attendees. Now, if you select the presenters, what that does is it dialogues with everyone that has the presenter privileges. So that way you can dialogue back and forth as well as while the class is going on. But the students cannot actually see that chat thread, which is very powerful. The hosts, obviously Josh and I, or Christina, or whoever needed to do the training and be in there as hosts, we have the ability to chat amongst ourselves, again, without sharing it with anyone else. But again, very powerful. We can then go down and select the attendees. So in this case, we have a stage student called Joe Student made up, but I could actually start a private chat by Joe Student by going and clicking on his name, and I can type in a specific text thread that only would be seen by that student. The other students would not see it, which is, again, very powerful. Maybe we have to zing them a little bit. Maybe their level of engagement had dropped, and we said, hey, Joe, are you still there? Are you in the software? Is everything okay? It's very powerful. The other way that you can do the personal chat is you can actually click on the student's name on the attendee list and start a private chat that way. So there's a couple different ways you can start your private chat, but again, a very powerful feature. Josh emphasized it earlier how powerful this chat pod is, and that we're seeing in some of the pilot courses we've run the virtual classroom, it's just exploding. students are using it, instructors are doing it, hosts are using it, we're dialoguing back and forth, we're answering questions, students are answering other students' questions. It's extremely powerful that you engage in the chat module, but that you also are an expert in using the chat. At the bottom of the chat screen, you'll see that you have multiple tabs right now. You'll see there's an Everyone tab, which is where you're dialoguing with all the students in the classroom. But then you'll see also where I started that private chat with Joe's student. You'll see that there's 2 tabs down at the bottom. And if I were to pop up another chat thread, say I wanted to start just with the presenters, you'll see that presenter tab pops up as well. Okay, so that's the chat pod. Again, very, very powerful. Can't stress how important this is to doing our virtual classroom here at MFA. The next that I want to talk to you about is going into the attendee list. So if you see on the top hand right side of the screen, you'll actually see the list of attendees. And Josh alluded to it earlier, but the way the software works is that you're either a host, a presenter, or a participant. Participants are our students, presenters are our instructors, and the hosts are the people that have the higher level privileges that will be in every single virtual classroom leading the training effort, working through technical difficulties, helping students with chat and audio problems, and we'll also be there to help moderate the chat pod, as well as popping up poll questions, changing presentation layout. So that's the 3 different privilege levels. When you're in there, you actually have the ability to expand or minimize each of the participants. So if I didn't want to see who was actually a host or the presenter, I could actually minimize those or close them down so that nobody sees them. And that way I have the full window to see all the participants. This gets more challenging as we make larger virtual classrooms. Our first pilot, we had 15 students in the classroom. With the upcoming career recruit class, we're going to have 54 students or 54 participants in the software. That list is going to get quite large. So in some cases, you're going to have to minimize that so you can see the whole screen, or in some cases, expand it and then scroll through the number of students. Obviously, today there was only 1 student, so there's nothing to scroll through, but in the future, you will have a lot of participants to scroll through. Other than that, that is really 2 of the functions that I wanted to do on this in this feature right now of the software. So Josh, if you wouldn't mind at this time, if you wouldn't mind popping me over to presentation mode so that I can take the instructors to the next phase. Okay, if you noticed, the actual presentation actually changed, your background changed. You now have in the middle of your screen the share my screen icon, but you also see that you now have the 2 webcams for, in this case, the hosts or the presenters are up on your top right-hand side. You still have the attendee list, and you still have your chat window. And Josh, if you wouldn't mind just minimizing the attendee list a little bit so we can see the top of the chat window. So you'll see that you still have the attendee list there, you'll have the webcams, and you'll actually have the chat box there. And that's how we're going to keep our standard virtual classroom set up for the presentation mode. From here, this is where the instructors or the presenters then decide what content they want to share. So I want to talk about all the different options here on your screen. So when you click the click down options, you have a few different options to do. You can do share my screen, you can do share document, or you can do share whiteboard. Okay, and I'm going to take you through each one of these features and show you the power that we have of sharing. So the first one I'm going to start with is share my screen. So what this basically does is take you over and shows your desktop. As you can see, mine is quite cluttered. And then I go down to the bottom right and I click share. And now essentially what I'm doing is I am sharing my desktop with the students. And they can see everything that is being shared. It's powerful if there's something, a picture, a video, or a presentation, or an Excel spreadsheet that you wanted to do. This is how you would use that in the share my screen. Next, I want to take you through is share document. And this is the one that we're going to typically take you through the most. This is where you have the ability to go to share history or share whiteboards. And then what you'll see is that, in this case, Josh and I have uploaded a lot of technical content for a class already. And you have the ability to look at your share history and then go grab a file and then click OK. And basically, this takes you into what they call Adobe Presenter. It's like a version of almost like PowerPoint presentation. Now you're in the presentation mode. And you actually can see the contents on the slides themselves. And the first thing you want to do is you want to show the notes of the outline. So down on the bottom left of the screen, you can see you have the hide sidebar, or you can show the sidebar. And for the instructors, the presenters, we want to have that sidebar up there. And this becomes extremely important if the program coordinator has taken the time to put notes in the PowerPoint slides. This is extremely important because you can see those notes. What's extremely nice about the software is those notes or outline do not show to the students. They only show to the hosts and to the presenters. That's a very powerful feature. So you certainly want to take that or enable that. Next, once you're in the presentation that you want, down on the lower left-hand side of the screen, really simple. Just like you would click on PowerPoint, you would click the next, and you would go to the first slide in your presentation. You would then lecture to that slide, just like you would. Maybe you're using the instructor notes. If there were instructor notes on there, some tidbits that you wanted to share. Otherwise, you're going through and lecturing to that slide. When you're done with the slide, you hit advance or next, and now you're into the next slide. And again, you're talking to that. One of the very powerful features in the software as well is if you wanted to emphasize or highlight something on this slide, you also have a few different features that you can use. The first one I want to talk to you about is the pointer. So about in the top middle of the screen, you'll see the pointer icon. Go ahead and click on it. And what that now does is give you a green pointer button where you can move it around the screen with your mouse and emphasize something either specifically in this picture, or you wanted to highlight a specific text within the slides themselves. That's really powerful. Each presenter can move their pointer around, or you can take turns. One presenter moves the pointer and the other one moves it the other way. But if you have multiple presenters, you each have that ability to move the pointer around. So very powerful to use the pointer. The other software feature that I want to talk about is the drawer icon right next to the pointer. So you go ahead and click on the drawer. And then what happens is there's a menu bar that opens up on the left-hand side of the screen. What that does is it gives you the ability to select what you want to do with the draw feature. So the one I like using is you highlight the marker, and then now you have the ability to highlight certain text on the screen by just drawing around it. Or again, you could draw an arrow. You could highlight something like that in a picture. So this is in the marker. Again, very powerful feature. Scroll down below the marker. You actually have a text button where you can now start typing in text. And you can start typing text. You can move that around and enter different boxes. You could also draw borders around certain things. Again, very, very powerful feature, that you can use within the software. Again, it just helps us get across to the students by allowing you to highlight what you want to emphasize in the text or in the presentation, no differently than what we would do on a dry erase board or on a chart pad, no different. What's really great is when you use the pointer or the draw feature, when you open this presentation the next time, those marks are all gone. It is not saved. It's only temporary while you're in that slide. When you scroll to the next slide, all those items are gone. Okay, you can choose to start drawing or highlighting text here. Let me go back to the marker again, and I'm just going to emphasize this here. You again can use that, but once you're done with the draw feature, you just go back, click on the draw icon, and all the draw features disappear. Really simple. Again, you just keep scrolling through your presentation, no different than how you would do in PowerPoint. When you're done with this presentation, or you have to leave the presentation because you want to go play a video, what you do as the instructor is you click next to the pointer, there's the stop sharing button. And what you would do is stop sharing. You would go back and says, okay, well, I need to either grab the next presentation or I want to grab a video. And I go back to share my screen, share document. And again, I'm going to go grab maybe a video in this case, and I'm actually going to start the video. The key thing we want to emphasize when you're about to play a video is mute your mic.
That you can't reverse, that are going to be ingrained on who you are.
Lost myself into keeping busy, became very much a workaholic. Spent all my time just being busy so I wouldn't have to think about things.
I had a lot of guys that I worked with who'd be
At time, you can, once you unmute your mic, you obviously can pause the video, fast forward the video, do anything that you need to in the video when you're done sharing it. Again, when you're done with the video, you would just go back to stop sharing again, and now you're back again to maybe go back to shared document and grab the next lecture or the same lecture you were in and move on to the next presentation. Okay, so that's share document within the pull down. And the last one I want to talk to you about is share whiteboard. Again, a very powerful feature within the software. This is basically just a full-blown, same thing you saw me using the draw icon within the presentation, but this is just a full whiteboard where, again, you can start drawing just like you would, you know, on a dry erase or on a chart pad. And you want to start drawing things, and you're going to say, okay, this is the A side, and you know, you want to emphasize certain things. Okay, B, we're going to emphasize, and then C here, and then emphasize D here. And again, you could start drawing things, start typing all kinds of text in, and using this whiteboard. This is a great way to break away from the presentation and expand on certain points that you're making, or maybe it was warranted because a student had a question, and you go right into the whiteboard feature and you start explaining more. Again, all built into the software, very, very powerful feature. Again, you're done using the whiteboard, you would again click stop sharing, and then you could go back to sharing a presentation or opening a video or anything that you need to do. That's about all I have on the technical aspects of the software. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Josh or open it up to any questions that you all have. So at this point, you get to a certain part of the presentation, maybe it's almost break time, maybe it's 45 minutes to an hour. Now you're going to ask the host, or the host is going to decide to pop up a poll question. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Josh, if you wouldn't mind popping up a poll question for us.
Great. So as a host, what I'll do is I'll go to the pods mode. I'll go down to the poll section, and you'll see here that these 4 questions have been preloaded. This is important as an instructor and a coordinator to make sure your classroom has been set up. So these questions have been preloaded, and you'll see just at a high level we have a couple questions. This question here is subject matter based, and this is just an accountability question. So as we go through, I will open.
What you'll see here is the poll question has been popped up. We had a student, in this case, answer the question. And then what the host has the ability to do is you can click on the view votes, which actually shows how people voted. Now, if you had 50-something students here or 25 students, this is where viewing the votes becomes important, especially if you had a bunch of people that didn't answer the question correctly. This is where you can gauge, are your students getting the material that you're teaching them? If you see 50% of the answers are wrong and 50% are correct, then maybe you're not quite getting the point across to these students, and you might want to stop and go back into the lecture and emphasize these points. The other thing is that, and Josh alluded to it earlier, not only is used for gauging technical information and how well the students are picking it up, but it is the only way that we can actually give the students attendance, because we're no longer asking them to sign a student roster, because they're actually attending from their living room or from their station. So this is something that I got DFS legal approval on, is that the way that we give students attendance in LMS is actually the fact that they participate in a poll question. If students don't participate in a poll question, they're not going to be given credit or attendance for that day. And that becomes very important, especially if you're in a career recruit class and you need to attend all 50 days. If you're not answering all the poll questions, that tells us you're not engaged in the class, or you're not following along in the software, because maybe you've minimized the screen and you went over to Snapchat or watch YouTube or email, and you're not paying attention to the presentation. And we sense that on the host side, there's something they call level of engagement. We can monitor that, but also if you don't engage in the poll questions, you won't get attendance for the day. That's really important, that the host pops the poll questions in a timely manner throughout the training day, and that we, at the end, Josh is going to close this poll, and then we would theoretically go back to the presentation mode. So Josh, go ahead, you can close that down, thank you. And then I would resume my lecture, again, going through each of the notes or each one of the slides until we get to another stopping point for either a break or actually popping another poll question. Also, one of the things I wanted to highlight as well, that I haven't alluded to, is what we call the status bar, which is next to your webcam option. And when you click on that, this is what students are going to use to draw your attention. The first one right at the top is something that they have the ability to raise their hand. And this is where it will pop up on the screen. It will notify the presenters and the host that a student has raised their hand. The one at the top of the screen is the first one to raise their hand. So if there's 20 people that raise their hand, the one at the top of the screen is the one that actually raised their hand first. So if I was the presenter, I would say, okay, I see Joe's student raised their hand. Go ahead, Joe, open up your microphone and ask the question. And at that time, the students would verbally ask the question, and then the instructors have the ability to dialogue back with them. The other thing you'll see is student has the ability to agree or disagree. If you ask maybe a question of the class, you can do that, and it status bar up, you have the ability to go to step away. This is where the student is telling the instructors and the host that I've had to step away. Maybe I have to go to the restroom, or maybe I have to take an urgent phone call, but that I've temporarily stepped away from the software. And this also pops up on the screen for the instructor and the host to see. You also see some other features there: speak louder, speak softer, speed up, slow down, laugh, or applause. This is all something a student can do to interact with the presenters or with the host themselves. That is the status bar. You'll probably see during your training that either step away or raise hand feature is probably the two most prominent used features of status.
That said, though, I'm hoping that the students are going to start to engage a little bit more, as a method of support, using the applause, in support. It's kind of in at large presentations or in big classroom settings, you do see students or an audience with, a placard being able to hold up red or green as a sense of agreement or disagreement. And it's a presenter's way of gauging the audience in real time. Are they with me, or are they opposed? For better or for worse, is, what's the tone, what's the temperature of the room, and perhaps if they're getting a bunch of applause or agreements or disagreements, the presenter might want to adjust the message or pause for a moment. These are just tools in the toolbox that will augment the way you teach.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. That's a great point. Since we only are going to do the poll questions at a preset frequency, it's not going to be maybe as often as you need to gauge, are the students getting it? You're not going to be able to read their body language. You're not going to be able to see their facial expressions. So go ahead and feel free to use the status bar and ask students a question while you're lecturing. And make a statement, ask a question, and then ask them to use the status bar, either to raise their hand or do they agree or disagree. And that way it checks their level of engagement as well, and we know they're actually paying attention to what you're teaching them.
Okay, so the other feature that we want to call your attention to is the other layout, which is we've preloaded 3 layouts. The collaboration layout. We haven't seen people using this all that often, but it's here for you. And I'll call your attention to a couple things that reasons why you might want to switch over or ask the host to switch over to this layout. And again, this is a feature that only the host would do for you. The files pod is important. For instance, if for some reason you wanted to share a Word doc, if for some reason you had an image that you wanted to share, you didn't want to email it to everyone, as an instructor, as a presenter rather, you have the ability to click and upload anything from your computer or shared content. So this is just a very quick workflow that gives the presenters, the instructors, and coordinators the ability to share files either with other instructors or with students. And you can decide on who gets these. But this is preloaded in the collaboration pod. The other feature that we have available to us, but we don't want to keep up all that often because it does obviously use up real estate, is the discussion notes feature. So if you had notes on how to update the presentation, on things that you wanted to call attention to someone else that might be coming into the classroom behind you, any number of reasons why you'd want to collect notes in a single place, this is preloaded into the layouts section for you. Again, this is the collaboration layout.
Okay, at this time, we'll conclude the training here because we've taken through all the critical facets or the critical parts of the software. So this time, Josh and I would both like to thank you for attending the training today, and we would turn it over to all of you to ask questions.